That's a point-blank shot. The distance is less than a meter. A shot that should have instantly ended a life. But the man doesn't fall. He keeps advancing toward the shooter. This isn't a scene from a Hollywood action movie. This is the classified reality of Red Army assault groups, a story rarely told in school textbooks. What if I told you that Soviet engineers attempted to cheat death and that the price of this experiment was paid in the blood of elite detachments? In this video, we will cut through the iron skin of World War II. You will learn why the first batches of Soviet body armor were not a salvation for the soldiers, but a death trap in the snows of Finland. We'll reveal why troops were forced to carry 9 kilograms of dead weight that strained their backs and left them gasping for breath, and why Germans in Stalingrad reported a superstitious dread of Russians whom bullets cannot touch. The history of warfare is an endless pendulum swinging between the means of attack and the methods of defense. Since humanity first took up arms, the soldier has always strived to secure himself on the battlefield, to turn his body into an impregnable fortress. In ancient times and the dark centuries of the Middle Ages, this goal was served by various types of armor, from leather jackets reinforced with metal rings to shining plate armor sets that covered the knight from head to toe. It seemed that metal would forever remain a reliable barrier between life and oblivion. However, the advent and rapid development of firearms introduced its own cruel adjustments. Heavy, bulky metal protection suddenly lost its relevance. A lead bullet, fired even from a primitive, slightly modernized musket, easily pierced any breastplate, making the wearing of heavy iron meaningless and even a dangerous burden. For several centuries, the soldier remained virtually defenseless against flying metal, relying only on luck and the folds of the terrain. But history is cyclical, and the 20th century, which brought conflicts of unprecedented scale to the world, forced military theorists and engineers to once again look to the past, reevaluating it at a new technological level. The situation began to reverse due to progress in metallurgy. New high-strength steel alloys emerged, capable of withstanding the enormous dynamic loads and impacts of modern bullets. This gave a powerful impetus to the revival of the idea of personal body armor, no longer as an attribute of chivalric romance, but as a purely pragmatic tool for survival. The Soviet Union, closely monitoring global trends and the escalating situation in Europe, did not stand aside from this process. The awareness of a dire need for change came not in the quiet of offices, but under the roar of cannon fire in the Far East. After the fierce fighting at Lake Hassan in 1938, it became abundantly clear to the Soviet command the concept of unprotected infantry needed an overhaul. An analysis of casualties showed frightening statistics among assault units.
Those who led the charge, who broke through the enemy's fortified lines, suffered the heaviest losses. Shrapnel and bullets mowed down the rows of the bravest and best-trained soldiers before they could even get close enough to the enemy trenches to throw a grenade. It became obvious that enhanced personal protection for assault groups was essential. These tragic but vital conclusions served as the starting point for the large-scale effort to create a steel breastplate for Soviet soldiers, a project that was destined to save thousands of lives. The task of national importance, to create a second skin for the soldier, was entrusted to the Leningrad Scientific Research Institute, NI-13. The choice was not accidental. The institute already had solid experience in developing protective gear, particularly in creating steel helmets. The research group was headed by Mikhail Ivanovich Koryukov, a distinguished specialist in metallurgy and thin armor. His name was already known in inner circles due to his participation in the creation of the unique 36 SGN steel. This material, used to manufacture helmets, stood out for its exceptional characteristics. Despite its comparatively thin gauge, it possessed high bullet resistance and toughness, preventing cracks upon impact. Now, this experience had to be applied to protecting the torso. The engineers understood they were on uncharted territory. The first experimental models were indexed as SN38, Steel Breastplate, Model 1938, But as is often the case with pilot projects, they did not see widespread use. The designers sought a balance between weight and strength, shape and ergonomics. The result of these searches was the next model, the SN-39. It proved to be much more successful, passed range tests, and even saw real combat conditions during the Soviet-Finnish War. The batch was small, only about 200 units were manufactured. Of these, 50 were immediately sent for rigorous testing, and the remaining 150 went to the active forces on the front line, where the harsh climate and the resistance of the Finnish army were to deliver the final verdict on the new design. Structurally, the SN-39 represented a significant step forward. It consisted of 2 armor plates, 3.7 millimeters thick, which was quite a serious figure for wearable protection at the time. The upper part anatomically followed the shape of the chest, covering the heart and lungs. The engineers also considered the need for firing. The right edge of the plate was characteristically cut away so that the massive steel sheet would not prevent the soldier from tightly pressing the rifle buttstock to their shoulder. The lower section was movably attached to the upper one with straps, which theoretically allowed the soldier to bend and maintain relative mobility while protecting the abdomen and groin area. Range tests inspired optimism. The breastplate confidently withstood hits from shrapnel from the popular RGD-33 grenades, and even from 82mm mortars exploding nearby. Moreover, the armor could stop a light 7.62mm rifle bullet if the shot was fired from a distance exceeding 350 meters. It seemed the solution was found. But the reality of the Winter War turned out to be much harsher than laboratory calculations. In the snow-covered forests of Karelia, it became clear that the enemy, knowing the terrain well, often allowed attackers to close in much nearer. Finnish snipers and machine gunners used heavy and often armor-piercing bullets, against which 3.7 millimeters of steel was no panacea.
The effectiveness of the SN-39 dropped sharply as the combat distance shortened. Furthermore, another critical flaw was revealed. The protection extended exclusively to the front of the body. The soldier's back remained completely vulnerable, which could be fatal in the conditions of maneuver warfare, ambushes, and encirclements. The experience, paid for in blood in the Finnish snows, was not in vain. The designers at NII-13, analyzing the reports from the front, decided to pursue enhanced protection. The logic was simple. If the armor is penetrated, it must be made thicker. Thus, the SN-40A was born. The thickness of the steel sheets was increased to an impressive 5.2 millimeters. This turned the breastplate into a veritable wearable shield. Now it could withstand a direct rifle hit from a distance of 150 meters, which significantly increased the chances of survival in general combat. Bullets fired from submachine guns ricocheted off it harmlessly, and shrapnel from mines and grenades became virtually non-dangerous to the covered parts of the body. In addition, the massive steel plate provided excellent protection in hand-to-hand combat against bayonet thrusts, which were still a reality of trench warfare at the time. However, invulnerability came at a high cost, and the currency in this case was weight. The mass of the structure reached 9.3 kilograms. To a modern person, this might seem like a manageable load, but for a soldier who must run, crawl, carry a weapon, ammunition, entrenching tools, and knapsack, an extra 9 kilograms became a critical burden. This was especially felt during total mobilization, when people of all physical conditions joined the ranks, and not everyone possessed the strength of an athlete. The SN-40A began production in December 1941, during the most difficult period of the war, and a total of about 5,000 units were produced. Due to its weight, this armor could not become a mass item. It found its use mainly in specialized assault groups, where tactics involved short, ferocious dashes, and where protection was prioritized over mobility and endurance. By 1942, as the war entered a prolonged and even more brutal phase, it became ultimately clear. Heavy cuirasses were not suitable for everyone or every situation. A reasonable compromise was needed. Design thought resumed, trying to find the golden mean between reliability and comfort. This led to the development of a lighter variant indexed as the SN-42. engineers took the bold step of reducing the armor thickness to 2 millimeters. This lowered the mass of the item to an acceptable 3.5 kilograms, a weight comparable to 1 or 2 extra rifles. Of course, the protective properties slightly decreased compared to the heavyweight SN-40A, but they still remained sufficient for most tasks. The new cuirass reliably stopped pistol and submachine gun bullets, as well as small shrapnel, which accounted for a huge percentage of casualty-causing elements on the battlefield. True miracles occurred where the SN-42 withstood point-blank hits from 9mm bullets, saving the wearer from certain death. This model became the most mass-produced and famous, actively used in the turning point battle of World War II, the Battle of Stalingrad. It was in the ruins of the city on the Volga that the steel breastplate unleashed its full potential. Command and political officers noted an interesting psychological effect. Soldiers equipped with these cuirasses behaved much more confidently and boldly in battle.
The awareness that their chest was covered with steel reduced stress, allowing them to aim more coolly and advance more resolutely toward the enemy. The SN-42 performed excellently in urban combat, where distances were minimal and soldiers were often in a vertical position, running from cover to cover or firing from window openings. In the narrow corridors of ruined houses, where hand-to-hand combat often erupted, the steel plate served as reliable protection against a knife or a stray bullet. It is important to understand that even the lightened breastplates were not intended for everyone. This was specialized equipment, a tool for professionals. Primarily, they were issued to assault engineer sapper brigades, the elite of the Red Army, respectfully called the Armored Infantry. These units carried out the most complex and dangerous tasks. They moved ahead of the main forces, gnawing through the enemy's defenses. Under heavy fire, they had to destroy pillboxes and bunkers, clear paths through minefields, cut barbed wire, and storm fortified buildings. The logistics of armor distribution had its strict specifics. The breastplates were sent precisely to the units where active assault operations were planned. These were often engineering companies and battalions which needed to buy extra time to complete their work. In this sense, the steel breastplate became not just an item of clothing, but a crucial tactical tool. It allowed the soldier to prolong life for exactly those few seconds necessary to throw a bundle of grenades into an embrasure, set an explosive charge, or secure an assault ladder. These seconds gained often determined the outcome of the battle for an entire block or elevation. However, every medal has a reverse side. In ordinary field conditions in open terrain, the SN-42 could be more of an obstacle. While crawling plank style, the rigid steel plate snagged on the ground, restricted movement, and pressed on the diaphragm, hindering breathing. This is why breastplates were rarely seen in infantry units operating in fields and forests. But in street fighting, where the soldier mostly stood, ran, or shot from a kneeling position, this protection played a decisive role. It is no surprise that it can most often be seen in chronicle footage from Stalingrad, Königsberg, or Berlin, cities turned into fortresses. The scale of production speaks for itself. During the war years, Soviet industry produced about 300,000 units of the SN-42 and SN-40A models. Against the backdrop of a multi-million army, these figures may seem modest, a drop in the ocean. But it should not be forgotten that the breastplates were a niche tool. They were never planned to be issued to every recruit, simply because most soldiers, artillerymen, signal operators, or drivers did not need them, and they were even detrimental due to the extra weight. This was a weapon of breakthrough, a scalpel for dissecting defenses, not a shield for the entire army. The war ended, the winning salutes faded, but the work of the designers did not stop for a minute. The experience, paid for with thousands of lives, demanded comprehension and development. Soviet engineers continued to perfect personal body armor, and already in 1946, the SN-46 appeared, a deeply modernized version of the frontline breastplate. The steel thickness was increased to 2.6 millimeters, which led to a mass increase to 5 kilograms. But this was justified. The protective properties noticeably improved. The new cuirass could reliably withstand a burst from submachine guns like the PPSH or captured German MP-3840s at a distance of up to 25 meters, which was an excellent indicator for close-quarters combat. The main novelty, however, was ergonomics. Structurally, the SN-46 became three-part, consisting of several segments. This technical solution provided much greater flexibility. Now the soldier could bend, turn their torso, and squat more freely while maintaining a continuous protective contour. This model became a kind of evolutionary bridge, a transitional stage from solid steel sheets to modern body armor, which would later begin to use flexible structures, Kevlar, and composite materials. If we turn to the human factor and listen to voices from the past, the attitude towards steel breastplates among frontline soldiers was mixed, as it was with everything in war. Some revered them, calling them their saviors, while others cursed them for their heaviness and inconvenience. In memoirs and award citations, one can find many stories confirming the effectiveness of this armor. The case of Squad Commander Lazarev, who became a true legend in his regiment, is widely known. During the storming of an enemy position, a German officer shot him practically at point-blank range. The bullet struck his chest, knocked the wind out of him, but could not penetrate the steel. Lazarev, taking advantage of the enemy's confusion, instantly counterattacked and neutralized the opponent. Such episodes, passed by word of mouth, seriously boosted the morale of the units, instilling the belief that death could be cheated. On the other hand, criticism concerned limited mobility. It was hard to make forced marches in the breastplate. Soldiers sweated in it in summer and froze in winter if it was worn directly over the gymnasterka tunic without a padded jacket. Considering the phenomenon of the steel breastplate, it cannot be viewed in isolation. It was just one detail, part of the complex protection system of the Soviet soldier of that era. Alongside it always stood the reliable SSH-40 steel helmet guarding the head and the simple but functional plashk palatka, rain cape or tent sheet, providing protection from the elements and camouflage. Together with personal weapons and the refined tactics of the assault groups, these elements formed the holistic image of the Red Army soldier, a warrior ready to operate in the most severe, inhumane conditions of urban warfare. If we delve into the details of combat use, it becomes obvious that the effectiveness of the steel breastplate depended not only on the steel grade, but also on what was worn underneath it. Soviet designers and experienced soldiers quickly realized stopping the bullet is only half the battle. The kinetic energy of the flying metal does not disappear upon impact with the armor. It is transferred to the plate and through it to the person's body. The impact of a rifle bullet, even if it did not pierce the steel, was comparable to being hit by a sledgehammer. Without cushioning, such a non-penetrating shot could lead to severe rib fractures, internal organ ruptures, and immediate pain shock, taking the soldier out of action just as surely as a wound. The salvation was the legendary Soviet vatnik, the quilted jacket. This simple padded jacket, stuffed with cotton batting, served as a primitive but effective damper. It was the multi-layer structure of the vatnik that absorbed the blunt force trauma, distributing the impact energy over a larger area. Instructions and manuals strictly recommended wearing the breastplate over the uniform, and in winter, over a greatcoat or short fur coat. This layered cake of fabric, batting, and alloyed steel turned the soldier into a hard-to-hit target, capable of withstanding hits that would be fatal to an unprotected infantryman. There were instances when dents a centimeter deep were found on breastplates after a battle, and the soldier beneath them only had a large hematoma, which, though severely painful, allowed them to remain in the ranks. Research in the field of personal protection did not cease in the second half of the 20th century. With the advent of new synthetic materials and ceramics, body armor changed beyond recognition. Crude steel was replaced by Kevlar vests, lightweight and strong ceramic inserts, and multi-layered fabric panels that absorbed impact energy. However, if one looks closely, the fundamental principles laid down by Soviet engineers in the SN series models remain to this day. The idea of protecting vital organs, the heart, lungs, abdominal cavity, has remained unchanged. The search for a compromise between weight, level of protection, and wearing comfort continues even now in every new generation of body armor. Moreover, it is curious to note that some modern models of tactical protection used by special forces around the world structurally echo the post-war SN-46. Modularity, the ability to adjust for a specific task, and segmentation to maintain mobility, all of these are direct descendants of ideas born in the Leningrad design bureaus and tested in the fire of the Great Patriotic War. Thus, it can be said with confidence that the Soviet steel breastplate was not just a temporary solution or a historical curiosity. It became an important, fundamental stage in the global evolution of ballistic protection. Its legacy, albeit in a modified form, lives on today, continuing to perform the main task: to preserve the soldier's life on the battlefield.